Oh, the sheep gets me every time. Good morning. How's everybody? Are you awake this morning? Okay, a few of you. That's good. I know probably some of the folks you're like, man, I'm used to seeing them here at this service. You know they're coming to the 11. They're delaying. They're not as spiritual as you. They stayed up late. They slept in. I think it's funny, though, that we're still telling each other to set the clocks back because the robots are doing that for us now. So we don't even need to think about it except for the microwave. But I'm glad that you made it and that you're early. And also, I'm just glad to be back. I was out last weekend, and our student director, Mariah, filled in and did such a fantastic job. And for those of you that are parents, aren't you so excited that we have such incredible leaders leading our kids, investing in them, pouring into them? And they just had an invite night this past week, and it was one of the largest student services we've had in the last several years here. Several kids gave their lives to Christ, and just an incredible Wednesday service. And so I couldn't be more excited about what's going on, and giving you guys a chance to get to hear from her and from her team. But we've been in this series that we just started last week. It's called Fight Songs, and we're going to continue down that path today. We're really just dissecting this one psalm, this ancient song that David, who's this prominent figure in the Old Testament, sort of sang to himself, meditated on, and these words, these lyrics, really gave him the strength to push through circumstances and situations in his life that he didn't know if he could actually move through. And, we all have stuff that we're dealing with, stuff we're wrestling with, stuff we're trying to figure out. And this psalm, I think, could really be a fight song for each of us to help us to move through whatever's going on, because I think it tells us about who we are and who God is and what that relationship can look like when it's healthy. And so we're going to continue down that path today. And I want to encourage you, take some notes, write down some things that stand out to you that just seem interesting. You don't even have to agree with what I'm saying. Just if you're like, man, I want to think more about that, talk about that a little bit later. I think that's one of the best things you could do as you leave here today. But if you are taking notes, the title of my message is Don't Drink the Water. Don't drink the water. Anybody ever been told this before? Going somewhere, visiting somewhere. One of the things that is, we live sort of over in this area right on the border of Norco and Riverside, and there's all these like hills and hiking trails and stuff like that. And so oftentimes when my kids have friends over and stuff like that, eventually we get to that place where we're like, you guys need to go outside. Okay, there's too many video games, too many things going on. Go out into nature. And so they're usually more than happy to go on a hike behind our house. And my wife is famous for always demanding before anybody leaves to go do anything outside. She's like, make sure you bring snacks and waters. Bring snacks and waters. And she demands this of them. They know it's a broken record. They hear it all the time. And sometimes these kids, these people that come over, they roll their eyes. But I don't do that. And the reason I don't do that is because I have been 4 hours into a half-hour hike before. And but everyone on this hike, friends were like, it'll be fun. And you're like, I'm not really a hiker. And they're like, it's a quick one. And half a day later, I've been stuck, and the little water bottle I brought is empty. There's no snacks. I got nothing. And in this moment of like desperation, I feel like I'm starving. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And I found myself in situations drinking things and eating things I never thought I would eat and drink just to survive. And, I'm not proud of it, but it happened. And maybe you have been there too. You've been in this situation, right, where you were like, man, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to drink from that funky stream. You know what I mean? There's something floating in there. It smells weird, but you know what? I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And so you did it, right? You were starving. You could feel your blood sugar dipping. And so you fished down to the bottom of your backpack and you found that old granola bar with like now hair matted to it, and you bit into it and there was a penny in there, you know what I mean? And you just did it, you did it. And normally you would never do this, you would reject it, but under these circumstances, right? You looked at what your kid was drinking, that little like sippy cup of apple juice with the little bits of hot dog backwashed into it. And like when you first started taking the hike, you're like, ugh. And then 2 hours in, you're like, wow, that looks so good. I could get the sugar from the apple juice and the protein from the hot dog. I need both of them. And you drank a little bit, and you came across a tree, and you were like, I don't know what these berries are. They might kill me, but I'm willing to take that chance because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. We do all sorts of kinds of crazy things, and I don't know what you ended up doing. I'm not here to judge. But I would guess that the reason why you did this is the same reason why we all do stuff like this in these sorts of situations. You were like, I'm dehydrated, I am lightheaded, I'm feeling weak and hangry, my mouth is dry, my stomach is cramping, okay? I've got needs, okay? And because I have needs, and I'm desperate, I'm going to take what I can get, and I'm going to do whatever I got to do to meet those needs. And you did it. And hopefully there's no video evidence of this, because you would be ashamed if somebody got a hold of it, because that's not normally who you are or how you act. But I would say that this isn't just sort of like a hiking, camping, survival situation in the wilderness sort of a thing. I think that we rationalize a lot of poor decisions this way. I think this is probably why, for some of you, you found yourself dating that walking red flag for 2 whole years. Even though everyone was like, what are you doing? That's not a good idea. It's the reason that you bought that really pricey car on 100% financing. You were like, 15% interest? That sounds great. Because I need to get to work. I got to do some stuff, right? It's why you lied to land that job that you really are not qualified for. You have no business doing because you felt like you needed it. And here is the truth about just the way that we work and the way that like our psychology works. The more anxious we are about like not getting something, the more willing we are to settle for almost anything. Think about at the beginning of anything, how like strict and how like narrow your boundaries, your guidelines, your expectations of something are. And the more desperate you get, the more you're like, let's widen that gate a little bit. And you just keep opening it up a little bit bigger, and suddenly you're willing to do just about anything. You find yourself in the midst of moments where you're like, you know what? I am 36. I am never going to meet anyone, okay? He's not the best, okay? He's not the most handsome, okay? But most of the date places we go are low lighting. I get that he's got anger issues. I get that that's going to be a problem, okay? But like, you got to do what you got to do, okay? You got to take what you can get. I'm sick of this car breaking down. I know this is not a good deal, okay? But I got to figure out a way to get to work. And you know what? You got to take what you can get. I hate lying, all right? I know it's wrong, but like the market is competitive. And I don't know how else I'm going to get this job, okay? I don't know how else I'm going to make ends meet. And so you just got to do what you got to do. And most of us on the other side of these moments find ourselves looking back and thinking like, why did I do that? I know better. I know I shouldn't have done it. But in the midst of that moment, it seems so logical, even though it was bad for you. And here's the thing I want to encourage you with, is that this has been happening for a really long time. In fact, the Apostle Paul, one of the most spiritual people who's ever lived, talks about his struggle doing the same thing. Romans chapter 7, verse 15, he says this, I don't really understand myself. I want to do what's right, but I don't. Instead, I do what I hate. This has got to be one of the most relatable verses in all of Scripture. This is the one that you should have embroidered on a pillow and put at your house, because you don't want it to be your life verse, but it's becoming that, right? Because this is the situation we find ourselves in, all of us. We all feel this way. And I would actually argue that often the reason we fall into sin isn't that we're evil, it's that we're exhausted. It's that we're so worn down, we're so tired that we have the inability to make a good decision because we feel desperate. And we're wondering if God is actually going to come through for us. And even scientifically, we know that being physically or emotionally exhausted actually impairs our thinking by disabling our prefrontal cortex, which is like our decision-making center. We experience decision fatigue, and we end up in survival mode. We end up doing something stupid. Decision fatigue is where you make a couple great decisions, and then you become exhausted, and you get to the end of the day, and you're just like, you know what? Do whatever you want to on screens, kids. because you used up all your decision-making power at the beginning of the day, fighting and fighting and fighting, and now there's nothing left. And because we live in such a fast-paced culture, what we often do is when we found ourselves making a poor decision, instead of sort of stopping ourselves and resting and refueling and recalibrating our lives, we just keep going because there's so much to do and so much going on. And so we add to that first layer of bad decisions with a whole nother layer of bad decisions. And we just keep compounding them on top of themselves. And for many of us, we find ourselves in this ongoing cycle in which the things that we do to feel better are making everything worse. Because the thing that we're doing to try and cope, the thing that we're doing to try and boost our feelings, the thing that we're doing to get through the day is actually, it's bottoming us out even more. And we end up just sort of throwing our hands up and saying the same thing you do on a hike. I don't know what else to do, okay? I have needs, right? You got to take what you can get. You got to do what you got to do. This isn't the best thing, but it's better than nothing. It's the lie that we tell ourselves to settle for so much less than what we are made for. And I think this is a pretty defeating cycle that we all find ourselves in. But I also think that this psalm that we're dissecting during this series has a lot of insight into a better way to be. And so we're going to read this all the way through again this week. In fact, on your chairs when you came in, we gave you this card, which is just a card to help you memorize this verse. And I intentionally had them printed in the New Living Translation because I know some of you, like me, you memorized this, but it was in King James. And so I wanted to put us all on even playing field where we all have to memorize something from scratch. And so if you memorize it in a different translation, this is the new one. And if you're brand new and you're I don't even know what you're talking about right now, you're doing the same thing the rest of us are. And so we're going to put it on the screens to read this. And I'm going to read out loud. You can kind of read it to yourself. And if you want to look at the card with a magnifying glass, you could do it that way as well. However you want to approach it. But Psalm 23 says this: "The Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name." He goes on to say that even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you're close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. And surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell or live in the house of the Lord forever. That King James is just trying to creep in. How many of you are having the same struggle the whole way through? You're that's not the way it goes. That's not the original. Jesus spoke Shakespearean. That's not the way he memorized it. We both might be a little bit off on that. But what we're going to focus on today, and maybe you've sort of figured this out, we're going to essentially spend a week of this series on each verse. And so this week we're going to focus on verse 2, which says, "He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams." And then we're going to even sneak into verse 3. He renews my strength. And so let's talk about meadows and streams. The most restful place possible for a sheep is a green meadow, but they're really hard to come by. The place that this poem was written in, ancient Israel, only about 20% of the land that's there could be classified as a place that could develop into a green meadow or a beautiful pasture, but they're only green at certain times of year, right? Because of the rainfall and sort of the way that the weather patterns work. And usually the places that are green, even back then, were because there was a shepherd that was preparing that pasture or preparing and irrigating that land. In Israel, there's way more rocky and dangerous and barren terrain than not. And the psalmist begins by essentially saying, most of the places that these sheep find themselves in are not going to be calming, nourishing, or engaging. And here's what I wonder. Does that sound like your life a little bit? Like how much, if you were to analyze your life and how you spend your time, what your schedule looks like, how much time do you spend in spaces that drain you? Maybe the spaces themselves aren't bad, but the way that like you feel when you interact with them or when you're in them for a long period of time, there's something sort of draining or deflating about it. Maybe because they're negative or exhausting or discouraging, maybe because they're counter to your values. And even though they're draining you, even though there may be, to a certain extent, they may be even bad for you, you just keep showing up because it's what you're used to. And what I think is so interesting is sheep do the very same thing. Like even when the grass is gone and the water is all dried up, they'll continue walking around in circles on the same barren landscape they're used to. In fact, there's a term that shepherds have for this. They say that a piece of land can be sheeped to death. And this is when the sheep have actually taken everything good out of the land, but they won't leave it. They just stay there, even though it has become unhealthy for them. And unless a shepherd comes along to lead them out, these sheep are going to wither and die. But if they look to their shepherd, who knows and sees what they don't, he'll lead them to a green meadow. But the question I think we've got to wrestle with here, it's great that God leads us, the sheep in the story, to these green meadows. But like, what is it about a meadow that helps sheep thrive? And I want to sort of unpack this morning. There's really three main components. And the first is this, that a meadow is an environment without competition or comparison. Like a meadow is this expansive green space that there is enough for everyone in. Other environments that the sheep may find themselves in at different times or different parts of the year may only have a few small patches of grass, a little bit of water here or there in a small little dip or reservoir. It may only have a couple little, comfortable places to lay and rest. And so what happens is every sheep in the flock tries to get there first. And they try and make sure that they get the best for themselves. They panic, they push, they fight each other. Because when there's only a few sheep that can win and all the other sheep lose, that's a desperate sort of a feeling. And so they find themselves competing and comparing themselves with one another. And I think we do the same exact thing. Maybe you've already noticed this about life in general, but certain environments breed competition and comparison in ways that stir up our insecurity and incentivize us to take shortcuts, abandon our values, or manipulate other people to get what we want. And maybe you find yourself in these environments where you're like, this is not actually who I am, but when I'm here, this is what I feel like I have to do just to function. In some places, right, the air is thick with this feeling. You ever been to like a club or a bar where like the air is just thick with desperation and cheap imported cologne? Everybody's trying to meet somebody, attract somebody, go home with somebody. Everybody's sizing everybody else up. And then in your mind, you're thinking like, I look fat, right? I can't compete with push-up bra Patty down there, okay? There's only like two nice guys in this whole building, and one of them's probably married already. I am never gonna meet someone. Why did I wear this stupid shirt? You know what? I'm gonna do a shot, okay? Some of you, this is a knowing laugh. You're not laughing at other people. You're like, oh, I think this is what my family is talking about. For others of us, though, it's not that. It's work, right? It's high pressure. There's only so many leads to go around. Everybody's hustling. And you're like, man, that's why I got to go in early and stay late. And I got to go in on my day off. And I got to answer every text because if I don't, somebody else will. And then they're going to get the count. And they're going to get promoted. And I mean, like, if you don't grind, you're going to get left behind. You got to be and look the part. Which is why I'm like, why did I wear this stupid shirt? I'm going to do a shot, you know? Or maybe it's a mom's group, right? And the reason why you joined, it was for camaraderie, but every time you go, you find yourself just riddled with envy. You're looking around at all the other women there, and you're just like, why does her kid never cry? That mine does all the time. What is going on? How does she come up with a creative craft and snack themed to whatever the day is? She knows about holidays I've never even heard of. How did she get back into those jeans so fast after having a kid? It's infuriating. Why did I wear this stupid shirt? I'm gonna do a shot. And sheep do this too. Not shots, but like sheep compare and compete. And in sort of the realm of sheep, it's called a budding order, right? Certain sheep will actually commandeer the best resources for themselves by headbutting their competition. And because of this, all the other sheep are always on high alert, and they're trying to protect what's theirs. And so because of that, they can't settle down and rest because they're always fighting for their place. And some sheep are actually driven insane by the paranoia that's brought on by this sense of scarcity, that there's not going to be enough for them. But a green meadow, it reverses all of that. Because there, every single sheep has exactly what they need. They can rely on their shepherd. And not just for food, but for protection as well. And this really brings me to the second reason that green meadows are the best place for sheep, is that it's an environment free from parasites and predators. And by that I mean, sheep are constantly in danger of predators that can hurt them and parasites that want to suck the life from them. So are you, by the way. Like, you are not much different than this. But like for us, what's threatening us is not really like jackals and wolves and worms and flies. Hopefully not. Your version is probably like, somebody who is always asking you for favors but wouldn't at all lift a finger to help you. It's probably somebody who will tell you whatever you want to hear to get whatever they want from you. Somebody who corners you constantly to complain about things in their life, but they never take any of your advice or do anything to make things better. When they're coming, they're going to say the same thing again. And in the world of sheep, if a sheep thinks they see or smell a parasite or a predator, they will get scared and they'll just start running. A lot of times they don't even know where they're running. They're just trying to escape. And what is fascinating to me is that they're actually more likely to injure themselves scrambling in fear than having an actual encounter with the enemy they're imagining. When I read that in a book about sheep, and I have read too many, for like the last month, my wife would come home and be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I have been reading a world history of sheep." And she's like, "You enjoy that. I'm going to be over here doing something that real people find fun." But when I read that, I just thought like, man, aren't we the same? Where we find ourselves having all sorts of issues, the actual enemy we're envisioning is not what's causing our problems. Our fear of them, even though they may not exist, is what is really wreaking havoc on us. And if one sheep gets scared, it can startle the entire flock and it can start a violent stampede, even if the thing that spooked the original sheep was just a shadow. Tell me this isn't internet culture right here. But their shepherd, when he's nearby, he scares predators and he safeguards them against parasites. Like just the sight of him, the scent of him, the sound of his voice calms his sheep, and they begin to realize, listen, I can let go of my anxiety because my shepherd has a remedy for everything that worries me. And in a meadow, a sheep begins to relax because they understand that this is true. It becomes clear to them that their shepherd is looking out for them, and if they're in danger, he'll step in. Nothing gets by him. When their eyes are on him, they're at ease. And this brings me to the third reason that a meadow is a place where sheep can really thrive and flourish, is because sheep do need to see their shepherd. And a green meadow is an environment that makes it easy to see the shepherd. And that's not every environment. Like, sheep need to be able to see and hear their shepherd as much as possible. If he's nearby but they can't see or hear him, they panic. And some places actually make it way harder than others to see and hear their shepherd. Most of ancient Israel is cluttered with these giant rock formations. The ground is uneven. It's crowded with trees, battered by harsh winds. The views are obstructed. The elements are muffling to sounds. But a calm meadow makes a shepherd's presence easy to detect. And this is true of you too. because you're already aware of this, right? Certain environments make it easier to see God and sense his presence and hear what he is saying to you. And just being in those spaces lowers your blood pressure. It puts you at ease. It reminds you of who you actually are and who you belong to and who is looking out for you. And this is my question for you this morning. Where are your meadows? Where are your meadows? I hope our church is one. I hope our church is one of those spaces and places that when you come here, that like you can feel your blood pressure lowering. You feel yourself relaxing into the environment. You feel yourself being able to see the shepherd of your life a little bit more clearly. But that's not going to be the only one in your life. There's going to be more. And some are going to be very unique to you. Maybe for you, it's a particular coffee shop or a restaurant or a hiking trail or a garden or a baseball field or a trusted friend's couch. And I think one of the first thoughts we think when we start to identify how significant meadows are and the fact that a good shepherd leads his sheep there is we just think like, man, I'm going to find one or two meadows and I am never going to leave. I'm going to stay there forever. But this is actually not what Scripture suggests. And this may sort of blow your mind a little bit because I think when we hear how great a meadow could be, we're like, why wouldn't you just want to stay there forever? But this is not what we're being told to do. In fact, Jesus says in John 10, chapter 9, verse 9 and 10, he says, I am the sheep gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy, and my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. And I don't know if you caught this, but when you look at this verse, the rich and satisfying life that God promises when we go to him doesn't all take place in a meadow. As much as we love it, as good as it is for us, we're not meant to just sit and camp out there forever. In fact, Jesus says that a full life, a rich and satisfying life, actually is coming and going. You can't just lay down in a meadow. And you've already figured this out, right? You got to go to work. And some of you are like, you talking about environments that drain me? Yeah, it's a little bit the work. It's my job, right? You're going to have to go there. And sometimes it's going to be stressful and frustrating. You're going to have to go visit your in-laws. And that place is not always calming. Sometimes it's very tense and stressful. You're going to have to deal with deadlines and disappointment and pressure and tragedy. And what this psalmist is saying is not that you need to live your entire life in a meadow, or that like if you're not living your entire life in a meadow, that you have not found God. No, that's not what it's saying at all. He's saying that like what you need to do is counterbalance time in exhausting environments with time in restoring environments. And when you look to your shepherd, God as your guide, he will let you know what that balance needs to be. He will show you when you need to go in and when you need to come out. In fact, good shepherds, they move their sheep from place to place, making sure that they get the right balance of whatever they need for the season that they're in. But again, in this verse, we see that a good shepherd leads their sheep to lay down in green meadows, but also to drink from peaceful streams. And what does that second part mean? Well, water is what gives us life, and sheep can't rest or relax when they're thirsty. And when a sheep it feels like they're dying of thirst, whether it's true or whether they just feel like they are, they will anxiously just root around looking for any stray droplet they can find to get their needs met. If they don't trust their shepherd to lead them to clean water, they'll settle for dirty, diseased puddles full of parasites. And you will too. You'll do the same thing. In fact, I would say that in terms of like analyzing these metaphors that are being used here, green meadows are really more about where you go to find rest, and peaceful streams are about what you do to find rest. That's the difference between these two things. And just like we talked about a few minutes ago, desperation can drive us to drink from some pretty dirty sources, to try and like feel like we're okay, like we're enough, like we can make it through. Sometimes those things aren't helping us at all. This is why some of us, we work nonstop, or we impulsively shop online, or we overeat, or we obsess over our body image, or we DM people that we know are just going to get us into trouble. Or we lose an entire evening on a show or a game or an app. It's why we did all those imaginary shots and the illustrations earlier. And this is the second question I think you need to wrestle with today. What are your streams? What are your streams? What are the things that you go to do to make yourself feel better when you're drained? Are they healthy? Are they holy? Because the reality of it is, when you try and get from something else what you can only get from God, you will overuse and misuse a positive thing until it becomes a poisonous thing. And it will actually take from you. Even though the thing itself is not bad, it cannot give you what you're looking for from it. And humans have been doing this for a long time. One Old Testament prophet quotes God as saying this. This is Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. He says, "My people have done two evil things. They've abandoned me, the fountain of living water, and they've dug for themselves cracked cisterns that can hold no water at all." I think the big question is, how do you know if you have dug a cracked cistern? Like if you were drinking from the wrong place. And I think the way you can tell is that you're trying to get your needs met the wrong way if what you're doing temporarily makes you feel better, but ultimately makes your life worse. This is a great filter to run the streams that you're running through. And we have all been here, right? You're tired, you're lonely, you're deflated, you just want to feel anything good right now. And so you know what? You got to take what you can get. You got to do what you got to do. But then later, after you do it, you hate that you did it. You hate the way you feel. You hate the person it's turning you into. You hate the power that thing has now over you. But how do you stop? And I would say that if you are struggling with destructive patterns, start putting yourself in different places. Because it is way harder to do unhealthy things in healthy environments. Have you noticed this? It's way harder to get drunk at a gym. You can do it, but you got to work harder. It's way harder to eat unhealthy food at a place that's only serving salad. Right? And a lot of times we place ourselves in certain environments around certain people and we're like, I don't know why it's not working. I don't know why I can't meet a nice Christian guy. Because a lot of them aren't in the clubs. Just letting you know. A lot of them aren't on that app, just so you know. But the inverse is true too. In fact, what this psalm is telling us is that you are more likely to drink from a peaceful stream inside a green meadow. If you are looking for certain sources that are actually going to refuel and refresh you, they're probably found in the spaces that cultivate those sorts of sources. This is the beauty of God coupling these together in this piece of poetry. I would tell you, find spaces that give you life and log time there. Find excuses to be there. And when you do, God promises to renew your strength and give you the kind of rest that fills you up and empowers you to go back out into the world and to actively make other places that are poisonous into pastures. This is what we're called to do. This is what Jesus means when he says that as you draw near to him, your job becomes bringing heaven to earth. He's talking about you follow the shepherd and then you begin to mimic the shepherd by going ahead of other sheep and irrigating places and preparing places so that they can come in and actually find rest themselves. I think you could summarize the psalm lyrics of verse 2 and the beginning of verse 3 in this way. When I focus on Jesus, He leads me to spaces and sources that make me feel secure. But I have to choose to settle into them. Maybe you have heard that adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's true. And in this illustration, in this particular psalm, God is the leader. He's the shepherd, and you're the horse, except you're not a horse, you're a sheep. And the water is also just water. You guys know what I'm talking about, okay? But here's the thing. In all of this imagery, we are told that God is always leading the sheep, because this is what shepherds do. Shepherds lead sheep, they don't drive them. In other words, God is going to show you where to go when you look to him, but he will not make you go there. He's going to show you what to do, but he will not make you do it. You have to make a decision to settle in to the spaces and sources that God points you to. And this is what I want to encourage you to do this week. I want to encourage you to look to God for your strength by analyzing the spaces and sources that you're leveraging to feel okay. So here's your homework. To take inventory of the spaces you spend time in and the sources you go to for rest. Talk about the effect that they have on you with somebody close to you, and ask God to show you where to go and what to do regularly to find rest. I think a lot of times we find ourselves sort of splayed out asking God, like, God, you got to help me. You got to rescue me. You got to show me where to go and what to do. God, you got to make me whole. And God is like, I would like to make you complete. I would like to help you through this situation, but you have to partner with me in the process of your own healing, which means you need to go over here instead of over there, which means you need to drink here and not there, which means when you're riled up and you're frustrated, you need to commit to these actions, not these actions. You need to go to these sources, not these sources. I think it's interesting that the shepherd is the guide who meets the needs of his sheep by showing them where to go and what to do. And I think if you pause and you look to him, you'll notice that he's been trying to do the same thing for you this entire time. The question is, are you looking? Are you listening? And are you willing to make some changes? A sheep that stays where they're at instead of following the shepherd to a place that's going to make them whole will wither and die. This is not God's plan for you. And I want to pray that as you begin to analyze these things in your life, that God would begin to give you his strength, his peace, his rest as he begins to focus your eyes and ears on him and leads you to sources and spaces that will make you feel secure. Would you bow your heads across this room with me? God, I'm so grateful for how you love us, for the way in which you lead us. And God, some of us, we're moving so fast, we're doing so much, we're so overwhelmed with so many things in our life and all the things we feel like we've got to do, and we find ourselves in way more spaces that drain us than fill us. And God, I pray that you would help us not to cope by drinking from dirty sources. Or maybe even things that were good once or good in moderation that we go to way too often or we lean into way too hard, and they are poisoning our souls. And God, I pray that as we move through this series, as we memorize these song lyrics, that this fight song would rise up inside of us and it would empower us to look to you, to see you through all of the noise, as you were saying, like, no, we're going over here, not there. That place may not be evil, but it's not the best for you right now. That may be okay for somebody, but you know that it is not working for you during this season. God, I pray that as we look to you, that you would point out and lead us where we need to go. And God, we would humble ourselves. We would follow you, knowing that you were taking us somewhere good. And that as we do, all of life would change. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Everybody said, amen, amen.